The bar was subdued, the ambient noise of antiquated machines permeating the atmosphere as the bartender polished a glass with a cloth. The establishment had deteriorated. The lights were subdued, producing elongated shadows on the walls, and the air reeked of spillage. Beverages and charred circuitry. This establishment was modest, however it belonged to him, and it was. The type of establishment where individuals preferred solitude, yet the tranquility was ephemeral as the door opened with a hiss. They arrived as a boisterous gang of pirates, exuding an aura of mischief and disorder. There were 5 individuals, each varying in shape and size, progressively more scary than the previous. Their laughing resonated throughout the small space. Their boots clanged resoundingly on the metal floor, indicating their incongruity in this environment. It was evident they were not merely transiting, they were searching for something, or worse, someone to target. The leader, a formidable reptile alien with iridescent scales, glared at the bartender, approached the bar and inquired if service was still available, or if the bartender was merely polishing the glass till it vanished. The bartender first did not answer. He only placed the drink down and turned away. The commander narrowed his eyes as he began to wipe off the counter, but this only appeared to thrill him further. "Humans," he spat. Turning to his staff with a smirk, he inquired, "Why so silent? Has a cat got your tongue?" Although none of them appeared to truly comprehend the joke, the others laughed, their amusement seeming more performative. Resembling a weapon, pointed and derisive, intended to slice through the air and penetrate the skin of its target. The bartender walked deliberately and composedly, as if he had not heard them, and seized a bottle. He retrieved drinks from the shelf and began pouring them, placing them silently before the pirates, as the leader observed intently. The leader's eyes narrowed, attempting to discern whether the man was frightened or merely foolish. "Are you deaf, human?" He struck his fist against the bar, causing the bottles to rattle. "I am still addressing you." The bartender remained silent, his hands moving with precision as he continued to pour, barely noting his surroundings. The disturbance prompted the pirates to lean in closer, perceiving an opportunity for amusement. A little, wiry alien with sharp teeth and elongated arms slithered. Closer, he knocked an empty glass into the floor, shattering it. However, the bartender, the pirates erupted in laughter, the leader striking the bar with his fist, as if challenging. The bartender responded by glancing at him, while the leader chuckled and reclined in his seat. "He is either the most foolish individual I have encountered or possesses a desire for self-destruction." The bartender, however, did not take the provocation. He effortlessly collected the fragmented glass with a sweep of his fingers, discarding it into the garbage without hesitation. His expression remained composed, his gaze concentrated, avoiding direct eye contact. In the presence of any of them, it was as though they were invisible. The leader was displeased, since pirates of his ilk flourished, regarding the anxiety of observing their victims writhe. Nevertheless, this individual was not providing him with what he desired not yet, at least, which just compelled him to exert greater effort for the free round. He called for the crew, seizing the bottle the bartender had just placed down, and proceeded to pour. The booze was carelessly poured into his crew's glasses, resulting in more spillage than filling, as the rest celebrated and hoisted their drinks. A toast was made to their commander, although the bartender remained mute, his expression inscrutable as he proceeded to wipe. The leader leaned in, his breath hot and nasty, as if the presence of others did not disturb him at all. "Do you believe you are superior to us? Are you not human?" he growled, "too esteemed to engage in conversation, too exceptional to serve us an appropriate beverage?" The bartender hesitated momentarily, his hand suspended. He momentarily glanced up from the rag, meeting the leader's gaze for a moment before returning to his task. It was a minor issue, yet it was sufficient to provoke a moment of displeasure in the pirate captain. "Indeed, that was my assessment." The commander snarled, exposing his sharp teeth. "You are just like the others of your kind, soft, weak, and fearful," he declared to the pirates. Erupted into another bout of laughter, buoyed by their leader's words. They began to increase their volume, becoming bolder and more boisterous, engaging in frivolous banter and making coarse jokes in an attempt to elicit a response from the bartender. However, he did not flinch, he did not even blink. It was as though he were anticipating something. Ultimately, one of the pirates, a corpulent, slug-like entity with viscous skin, seized the edge of the bar and leaned in closely. He snarled, "Your kind is not welcome here. It is no longer viable in this region. Perhaps it is time for you to depart before we do." halt the bartender's hands, ceasing their movement for the first time since upon entering, he remained motionless, the rag sitting on the counter. The pirates leaned forward, feeling a change, but they unable to discern if it was fear or another emotion. The slug-like pirate hissed, "What is wrong?" The bartender remained silent, instead choosing to quietly pick up. The individual took up the rag once more and continued to wipe the bar, while the pirates observed him for a brief period. The leader chuckled, albeit with a trace of annoyance in his voice, uncertain of how to interpret the situation. He remarked in a subdued tone, "You believe you are formidable, but you are merely an elderly man." An antiquated bar at a neglected station, the bartender remained unresponsive. That stillness, more than anything else, was beginning to irritate the commander. He struck his fist against the bar with greater force, causing the entire establishment to tremble. "Answer me, human," he roared. His words resonated throughout the confined area, prompting the bartender to finally raise his gaze. His eyes were icy and composed as he met the leader's stare. Lingered momentarily before he discreetly averted his eyes, reaching for another. The leader's face contorted with wrath as he began to clean the glass. Other pirates began to shift in their seats, anticipating an impending change. However, the bartender continued to speak. The absence of anything, more than any other factor, elicited laughter from the pirates. They believed they had him. They assumed he was defeated. For the time being, the pirates were gaining ground. Their laughing became increasingly harsh and cruel, and their patience was dwindling. The leader's eyes narrowed. As he leaned closer, observing the bartender with predatory intensity, he was unaccustomed to being disregarded. Particularly not by a human, and it was evident that he disapproved. One of the pirates, the repugnant, slug-like individual, struck. He knocked his glass off the counter, causing it to shatter on the floor. The bartender, as composed as ever, retrieved his rag and commenced cleaning up. He painstakingly cleaned the mess, his face devoid of any emotion. It seemed as though the pirates were merely background noise, prompting the leader to sneer at you. "He must be deaf or simply foolish," he remarked, his voice laden with disdain. "Regardless, I believe we have ceased to engage amicably." The bartender has yet to answer. His concentration on the fragmented glass, methodically collecting the shards with a steady hand, exemplifies the leader's patience. He abruptly seized a nearby stool and overturned it, the loud crash reverberating throughout the bar, attracting the attention of the other pirates. Subsequently overturned, with chairs and tables displaced, beverages spilled into the floor, and insults shouted. The environment was amidst the pandemonium. The bartender persisted in his duties as though nothing had altered, which was exasperating to the commander. His hand clenched, his rage bubbling over, as he realized this quiet individual was not going to grant him the gratification of the reaction that rendered him perilous. The pirates had anticipated terror and surrender, yet they were receiving none of it. "Do you believe you are superior to us?" the leader hissed. He extended his arm across the bar and seized the bartender's wrist, halting his movement. "I posed a question," he stated. The bartender's gaze shifted to the leader's hand. However, he remained silent. His composed manner and reluctance to interact were becoming increasingly evident. Disturbed the pirates, yet the leader tightened his grip, his claws penetrating the bartender's skin. "Perhaps we might consider an alternative." The leader instructed his crew with a sneer, "Teach this one a lesson," prompting the pirates to shout, their eyes glinting with excitement. The exhilaration of imminent aggression, they were accustomed to achieving their objectives by fear and intimidation, and they believed they were on the verge of breaking him. However, the bartender remained unperturbed. He neither recoiled nor exhibited any indication of fear. He stood there, awaiting with an inscrutable expression as the leader's smirk dissipated. They were receiving none of it. "Do you believe you are superior to us?" the leader hissed. He extended his arm across the bar and seized the bartender's wrist, halting his movement. "I posed a question," he stated. The bartender's gaze shifted to the leader's hand. However, he remained silent. His composed manner and reluctance to interact were becoming increasingly evident. Disturbed the pirates, yet the leader tightened his grip, his claws penetrating the bartender's skin. "Perhaps we might consider an alternative." The leader instructed his crew with a sneer, "Teach this one a lesson," prompting the pirates to shout, their eyes glinting with excitement. The exhilaration of imminent aggression, they were accustomed to achieving their objectives by fear and intimidation, and they believed they were on the verge of breaking him. However, the bartender remained unperturbed. He neither recoiled nor exhibited any indication of fear. He stood there, awaiting with an inscrutable expression as the leader's smirk dissipated. Replaced by perplexity, there was an anomaly regarding this man that had previously gone unnoticed. "Do you believe this?" The leader screamed, tightening his grasp. "You're tough, aren't you? But I've defeated those tougher than you," the bartender responded. The leader's gaze, his eyes calm, steady, and icy, paused momentarily. A spark of doubt resided behind his gaze, but it was swiftly supplanted by anger. Humiliation from the absence of response prompted the pirates to encircle. Their laughter, escalating into the formerly tranquil and unremarkable tavern, was now engulfed in a terrifying rumble of noise. Amidst the chaos, the bartender remained the calm center, unperturbed. Unperturbed, one of the smaller pirates lunged forward, striking his fist on the bar before the bartender. "What's the... Human, you are too fearful to retaliate still?" There is no response to the leader's smirk. Returned, albeit lighter, now poses greater danger. He is indeed frightened. Proudly, the slug-like pirate leaned in closer, his voice a low hiss. "Perhaps we ought to demonstrate the consequences for those who consider themselves superior to us." The leader acquiesced, maintaining his grip on the bartender leaned in, his wrist resting against the counter, exhaling a hot and rancid breath as he spoke. "To lament ever confronting us, the elderly man." At that moment, the bartender's gaze shifted. Down to his wrist, where Lapeter's claws continued to penetrate his skin, he neither withdrew nor resisted. Instead, he methodically and calmly placed the rag he had been using onto the leader, momentarily blinked in confusion before his anger ignited. "Once more, you believe you can intervene," before he completes his statement regarding the bartender's other hand. Darted swiftly and seized the leader's arm without hesitation. Movement was devoid of waste. The transition was abrupt and definitive, characterized by the leader's gaze. Widened in astonishment, as the bartender's grip constricted like a vice. He attempted to withdraw, but the bartender maintained his hold resolutely. Strengthening his calm exterior, the other pirates halted, observing in astonished silence the leader's demeanor. His bravado diminished, and his confident smirk contorted into an expression resembling fear. He had not anticipated this outcome. None of them anticipated that the bartender, this quiet and unassuming man, was not meant to be so. Resist, he was expected to cower and plead, yet he remained steadfast. The leader grunted, attempting to pull away, his grip unyielding as steel. However, the bartender's grip on his arm persisted for the first time since their arrival at the bar. The pirates were not amused. The atmosphere became dense with tension as the leader, now clearly struggling, recognized his inadequacy. The bartender quietly remarked, "You should have departed when you had the opportunity. You are no longer in control." He seized the leader firmly and just as swiftly released him, propelling him backward with considerable force. To propel the towering pirate into the nearest table, the tavern descended into a profound hush. The pirates immobilized. They shifted their gaze between their commander and the bartender as the leader sprang to his feet, fury evident in his expression. His eyes revealed hesitation. His crew, once eager for combat, now appeared uncertain. Uncertain and their confidence undermined, this was not the anticipated outcome. The formerly ridiculed and silent individual confronted their boss with remarkable composure. The leader's visage contorted with rage and shame, his pride compelling him to respond. Yet something within the bartender's composed and unwavering demeanor caused him to hesitate for the first time. Perceived an unfamiliar depth in the bartender's gaze, the leader roared, stating that this man has witnessed and survived actual combat. The bartender, frustrated and uncertain of his next course of action, kept mute, observing. Awaiting. The power dynamic has altered, and the pirates were aware of it. Bell led. He clenched his hands, his mind whirling, acutely aware of his crew's gaze upon him. Anticipating his subsequent action, the bartender's silence spoke more than words ever could. He showed no fear and refused to retreat, leaving the pirates uncertain. The leader's face reddened with fury. However, he refrained from taking further action and instead assumed an upright posture. Regaining his composure, he stared at the bartender, yet the menace in his eyes had. He was subdued, no longer in command, and he was aware of it for the moment. The bartender held the authority. The upper hand was evident, and the atmosphere in the pub was eerily hushed. Tension permeated the atmosphere. The pirates, who minutes ago were poised to wreak havoc, now stood immobilized. Uncertain of their subsequent action, the commander, still stinging from the setback, clenched his teeth, his eyes ablaze with determination. A blend of fury and astonishment, as if he struggled to comprehend the rapid turn in circumstances, yet pride remains of the perilous situation persisted, and he was unwilling to relent. while the bartender remained composed. His gaze remained steady, exuding the same serene assurance that had initially unnerved them. He was not teasing them. He boasted that he merely observed, aware that the decision now lay with the pirates, as crews shifted uncomfortably, seeking guidance from their leader. They saw that this would not be an effortless victory. Shouted more from shame than genuine rage, do you believe one minor incident? The old man threatened to intimidate us, his voice faltering slightly as he spoke. Efforts to appear formidable were evident when his claws extended nonetheless. There was a discernible delay in his movements, as if he were deliberating his actions. He was unaccustomed to being dominated, particularly by a human, and the sting of it still lingered. The bartender remained silent, his quietude once more serving as an unyielding barrier between them. It was disconcerting how composed he appeared. Remained remarkably confident despite the proximity of a bunch of armed pirates, the leader's nostrils flaring as he moved closer in an attempt to restore control of the situation involving his troops. They followed, but their pace was slower and more cautious, now fine-tuning the leader. He hissed, his eyes narrowing. "You wish to act tough? Let us see how long that endures." Extended towards the young individual at the bar, who had been observing the events with astonished eyes. At that moment, the leader seized the boy by the collar, dragging him from his seat, while the child struggled, terror evident on his face. However, he was no match for the pirate's might. The bartender's countenance remained unchanged. However, there was a faint indication. The leader smirked malevolently, shifting his position like a predator coiling before the blow, drawing the youngster nearer. To him now, "What does the old man," he mocked, "still wish to remain silent? Or must I commence?" The child gasped, clutching at the pirate's hand, but his strength was overwhelming. Seemed insignificant in comparison to the alien's crushing grip. The pirates chuckled darkly, their confidence restored as they observed their commander reassert power. The atmosphere transformed as the crew was invigorated by the demonstration. They anticipated that the bartender would ultimately capitulate, pleading for the release of the youngster. Nevertheless, the bartender's gaze remained composed, resolute, and unwavering. Silently, his hand advanced beneath. The counter was gradual and deliberate. The pirates did not notice initially. The leader's concentration remained on the struggling child, although his sight shifted downward just in time to observe the bartender's fingers. Around a substantial object, his smile diminished as the bartender retrieved the shotgun, aged yet well-maintained, exhibited a sparkling metal surface in the subdued illumination. While not extravagant, it appeared to be well utilized. Beloved and most crucially lethal, the pirates ceased their laughter as the leader tightened his grip. On the child eased just a touch as his eyes focused onto the weapon. The bar fell silent again, all eyes on the shotgun, now lying in the bartender's hands. There was no bravado, no showmanship in the way he handled it. He simply lifted it, aiming with the kind of ease that only came from experience. For the first time since they'd entered the bar, the pirates seemed truly terrified. The leader gulped hard, his grip on the youngster trembling. You wouldn't dare," he stammered, though his voice had lost its edge. It was evident he didn't believe his own words. The bartender remained still, his finger resting lightly on the trigger, his eyes focused onto the commander. There was no uncertainty in his moves, no sign that he would flinch. He wasn't bluffing, he didn't need to speak a thing. Wanted the pirates to know that the leader's swagger cracked. He dropped the youngster, who scurried away, eyes wide with fright, as the commander took a wobbly step back, hands lifted slightly as if to demonstrate he wasn't a threat. His crew, witnessing their boss back down, moved uneasily, gazing at each other in surprise and terror. The bartender didn't move, the shotgun still trained on the leader, waiting. The stillness drew on thick and stifling as the pirates sought to figure out their next move, but they realized deep down that they were out of alternatives. One of the pirates, the slug-like one, cleared his throat uneasily. Maybe we should simply go," he said, his voice quivering. The others nodded too, frightened to make any unexpected movements. The leader's face flushed with wrath and shame. But he wasn't foolish. He knew when he'd been battered. With a roar, he turned to his men, motioning for them to back off. "Let's get out of here," he spat, trying to save what little dignity he had left. They didn't need to be warned again. The pirates hurried toward the door, their arrogance gone, leaving behind the havoc they caused in the bar. The leader stayed for a time, his eyes blazing with fury. As he scowled at the bartender, "You'll regret this," he snarled, but his words lacked the venom they previously had. The bartender didn't answer, didn't even drop the shotgun, just remained watching till the leader eventually turned and followed his troops out of the entrance. When the pirates were gone, the bartender lowered the shotgun, his look as serene as ever, the tension in the room steadily Relaxed, the few remaining patrons exchanging eyes, still comprehending what had just happened. The kid, still disturbed, whispered a quiet thank you before hastily sneaking out of the pub. The bartender said nothing. He slid the shotgun back beneath the counter, then grabbed up his rag and started cleaning the bar as if nothing had happened at all. The door slid shut behind the final pirate, leaving the bar in a thick, nervous quiet. The patrons, who remained, barely moved, their gaze flickering toward the bartender, then quickly away, as if unsure what to make of what they just observed for a long at that time. The sole sound was the gentle clink of glass as the bartender discreetly stored the shotgun, his actions composed. He surveyed the room as though it were an ordinary part of his routine, evaluating the destruction: upturned chairs, displaced tables, shattered glass. The floor was significantly, but not overwhelmingly, littered. The type of disorder that could be rectified with sufficient time and patience, qualities the bartenders appeared to possess abundantly. He moved with intent, retrieving a broken chair and placing it aside, then sweeping the glass with a gentle, steady motion. His expression revealed no emotions, neither rage nor frustration, only a quiet determination. The tranquility derived from extensive experience, having witnessed circumstances far more dire than a few unruly pirates. Customers began to murmur softly to one another, still astonished by the bartender's adept handling of the situation. In the situation, several individuals regarded him with sidelong glances, as though perceiving him in a novel light. Light was uncertain about how to reconcile the quiet man they believed they understood with the individual who had just confronted a gang of pirates effortlessly. One of the diners, a weathered elderly spacer who, having remained seated silently in the corner during the experience, he rose and proceeded to the bar, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He was wary, yet there was a newfound respect in his eyes as he placed a few credits on the counter, plenty to cover his expenses. He drank and gestured towards the bartender, expressing disbelief at witnessing it today. He muttered, his voice coarse yet impressed, prompting the bartender to offer a slight nod. He acknowledged the man's statements silently and continued cleaning, unfazed by the attention. It was evident that he undertook none of this for acknowledgement or acclaim. It was merely a necessity that required fulfillment. Paused briefly to observe the bartender's actions before proceeding to the exit, as he departed from the remaining clients gradually. Subsequently, they settled their bills and departed individually until the bar was virtually vacant, resulting in a more tranquil atmosphere. The first tension subsided, although an underlying stream of something more profound and unresolved persisted. After the final customer departed, the bartender paused, resting on the counter for a time, his gaze fixed. He slid toward the door, his visage inscrutable. He was not contemplating the pirates, or even the disarray they had abandoned occupied his thoughts, which were focused on something profound, something known alone to him. There was a time when he would have embraced a confrontation of that nature, relishing the excitement and peril, but those days have passed. He had long abandoned that life for a reason, and moments like these served as reminders of why he had done so. He departed after completing the cleanup of the shattered glass, his actions deliberate and precise. Straightened the chairs, arranged the tables, and returned everything to its proper location. The bar may have been disorganized, but it was nothing he couldn't manage. That had always been his approach to challenges. Maintain organization in your surroundings and resist disorder. He meticulously wiped down the counter one final time, his hands in motion. Their habitual motions remained unchanged, providing a comforting familiarity in the routine. A method to stabilize himself following the recent events. It served as a reminder that this location, despite its harshness, the situation remained under his control as the door opened once more, revealing the young individual. A human traveler, having been ensnared in the preceding turmoil, retreated indoors, his complexion ashen. His eyes, wide with residual fear, were accompanied by a palpable sense of determination as he approached the bar. He paused momentarily, uncertain of how to engage the man who had just rescued him without uttering a word. "I merely wished to express gratitude," the boy stated awkwardly while rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't." The bartender observed him, his expression revealing an understanding of their intentions. As composed as ever, he offered a brief nod in acknowledgement of the child's gratitude without drawing attention to it. He was not inclined towards lengthy discussions, particularly regarding matters he believed were already resolved concerning the child. Shifted uneasily, casting a glance at the shotgun that remained positioned behind the bar. "I did not anticipate that someone of your disposition would be prepared for such a situation." The bartender arched an eyebrow. "Yet," the child quickly added, attempting to clarify, that you do not appear to possess a combative disposition. However, you confronted those individuals as if it were inconsequential for a brief moment. The bartender contemplated elucidating the situation to the children, an insight into his former life and the struggles he faced prior to opening this bar. Allow the moment to pass. There is no merit in revisiting the past. He made no alterations. Instead, he merely shrugged, implying it was inconsequential, and resumed wiping the counter. The child grasped the implication but continued to linger, observing the bartender with a blend of curiosity and respect. "Well, thanks anyway," he said quietly, turning to depart. "I." The bartender observed him as he exited, the door closing softly behind him. He stood there momentarily, the tranquility of the bar enveloping him. Once again, it was concluded for the time being, yet profoundly. He understood it would not be the final occurrence. It never was. The bar was devoid of patrons. Once more, silence prevailed, accompanied solely by the subtle hum of the station and the clinking of the bartender's movements. Everything had returned to normal. He stood behind the bar, hands calm, as they worked, much as it had been before the pirates arrived, performing the actions of cleaning and restoring order as if nothing had transpired. The silence was nearly palpable, reassuring a reversion to the customary pattern he favored. And even now that the peace was illusory, he understood that the peril was not genuinely absent, akin to those pirates did not only retreat and disregard the conversation. Information would disseminate among individuals. Questions would inevitably arise, as the station was not sufficiently large for this to remain undiscovered indefinitely. Return once more, perhaps seeking retribution, or perhaps intrigued by the one who remained unfazed in the face of adversity. The bartender sought tranquility upon departing from his former life, aspiring that managing this modest tavern would provide it. In this neglected region of space, it would suffice to keep him away from the fray, but he now understood that it was inconsequential. No matter the distance traveled or the effort to be silent, violence and chaos invariably located you. This had always been the case. Indeed, he completed wiping down the surface, placing the rag aside slowly. With intentional caution, his gaze shifted toward the shotgun concealed behind the bar. Yet he refrained from acting. He must continue to examine it. He did not require a reminder of its significance or its past, yet he understood its implications. To wield such a weapon, he had incurred significant costs over the years. Despite its life-saving capabilities, he had been reluctant to choose it. It arises once more, not at this moment or location. However, occasionally, options were exhausted. He adhered to the principle of fulfilling necessary obligations. It was a timeless law for him, akin to an ancient decree regarding the door. He opened with a gentle hiss, not immediately raising his gaze, his hand remaining in place. Approaching the shotgun, fingertips delicately brushing against the weathered metal. Whoever it was, they remained stationary, refraining from approaching the bar, while the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Amidst the newly heightened anxiety, a familiar voice emerged, low and calm, as words had already circulated. The bartender raised his eyes to Ed, his demeanor remaining unchanging, revealing him to be an older guy. A person clad in a basic yet durable jacket stood at the entryway. His visage was marked by years of arduous existence, and his eyes bore the profound gravity characteristic of one who had witnessed. The bartender immediately recognized him. He had not seen him in years. However, the recollections remained vivid, inscribed in a section of his memory he seldom explored. The man asserted, approaching closer, that they would not leave this matter rest, since pirates are averse to such situations. Being outshone, particularly not by someone of your caliber, the bartender remained unresponsive. The man was already aware of what was forthcoming, just as the bartender was. It was but a question of time before the pirates or worse sought confrontation. He had encountered worse adversities previously, and although I would do it again, that did not alleviate the difficulty of waiting. You still possess it. The man, with a subtle smile and a fleeting glance at the shotgun, remarked that he did not expect to see you select one. The bartender shrugged, offering the slightest indication of a response. He had none. Interest in rehashing earlier interactions is unwarranted. The past should remain in the past, regardless of circumstances. Frequently, it attempted to resurface. The man emitted a subdued chuckle, shaking his head as though he ought to have anticipated it. To anticipate a dialogue, one should refrain from excessive commentary. There was an absence of resentment in the exchange. His tone conveyed a profound understanding. He recognized the bartender's struggles and the circumstances that had led him to this point. A tranquil existence in isolation, they had endured numerous conflicts and losses, rendering more need for the man stated gently that mere words and an old shotgun will be insufficient when they return, and they will. The bartender's gaze remained unwavering. His hand, poised on the counter, is now no longer adjacent to the shotgun. He acknowledged the man's correctness. Pirates would not forget, they never did. However, that did not imply he was prepared to flee. This bar was all he had remaining. It was not much, but it belonged to him. He was resolute in not allowing anyone to take it from him, now or ever. The man sighed, yet there was a reverence in his gaze. "If you ever require assistance, you know where to locate me," he stated, although both were aware. The bartender would never solicit it. Instead, he provided a subtle nod, a non-verbal recognition of the proposal. Although he did not anticipate requiring assistance, he had consistently confronted his challenges himself. Was not going to alter now with a final survey of the bar. The man turned and he halted just before exiting, glancing back over his shoulder. His shoulder, "Good luck, old friend, you will require it." The door closed silently. He departed, leaving the bartender solitary. Once more stillness resumed. It was no longer the tranquil stillness he had originally envisioned. Now, it was a profound silence. That forewarned of an impending inevitability, he remained there for an extended moment, absorbing the gravity of everything settled upon him. He had experienced this numerous times before, and was aware of the outcome. There would be more to come. Increased conflict resulted in greater bloodshed and destruction. The tranquility he had pursued proved to be an ephemeral illusion, an entity that could never genuinely last. However, he made his decision long ago, and he would persevere regardless of subsequent events with a measured and intentional movement. The bartender resumed scrubbing the bar with his rag. The routine was his sole means of maintaining order. Disorder outside the station would persist as individuals traversed the area, potentially leading to trouble arising sooner rather than later. But for the present he had tasks to complete, which sufficed for today.